As we're continuing studying through 2 Corinthians, there's something interesting happening in the book of 2 Corinthians that references back to 1 Corinthians. See, there was a man within the church that sinned, and he was unrepentant. He didn't want to change. He didn't want to stop. And so Paul winds up and he tells the church, you need to boot this guy out the door. You need to kick him out of the church. But here's the most incredible part. When he comes back in 2 Corinthians, he reminds the readers to forgive. And he basically says, look, it's over. If this guy's repentant, if this guy's got his life right, if this guy's want to come back, then you open the doors and you let him back in. So Paul was in the business of bringing forgiveness here. And Paul, in verse 11, he ends his appeal by reminding the readers of the price of unforgiveness, of telling them, look, you can't continue to harbor this unforgiveness. You can't continue to blame this man. It's over. It's done with. Let it go. And in verse 11, he tells them why. He says, so that Satan will not outsmart us, for we are familiar with his evil schemes. Now that word schemes there is the word that I want us to stop and focus on for a second. That word schemes is speaking of a military strategy, okay? Because understand, in the Bible, we see constantly, we see this talk and these phrases that show you there's a war happening between good and evil, okay? There's a war taking place between God and between Satan and his forces. God and his angels, Satan and his forces. There's principalities and powers as it talks about in the New Testament. And these things are going to war around us. There's a battle around us all the time that we don't see. And the battle is for our souls. Sometimes the battle is actually taking place within us. I mean, if you're anything like me, you feel torn in a lot of different directions at times. Sometimes it's tough to do the right thing because bluntly, you don't want to. And so even though you know what you should be doing, you don't choose to do that because there's simply this, I don't want to. And that's what was happening here in the Corinthian church. They didn't necessarily want to forgive this guy. So what Satan was doing was he was attacking them with these schemes, this military strategy, with this warfare. And so what is happening here is Satan wants to slip behind the lines and he wants to set up camp in our hearts, okay? He wants to hold us captive. And one of the ways that he does this, one of the ways he attacks us is through bitterness and unforgiveness. It's one of the most effective ways that he does attack us. It allows him to hit us in something that is so delicate in us, and that's our emotions. When I feel hurt, when I feel I've been done wrong, when I feel someone has betrayed me, man, that's easy to hang on to, right? When it feels personal. When that friend hurts me, when that friend betrays me, when that church member treats me bad, that's right there in front of us. We can find ourselves getting angry without cause. We can find ourselves being too quick to criticize. When we feel that somebody has done something that we don't like, or that we don't agree with, or maybe that hurt us, you know what we are? We're really quick to criticize them. We'll avoid talking to certain people. We'll see them coming at church, in a store, walking down the street, in the neighborhood, and we'll do everything in the world we can avoid talking to that person. We'll nurse a victim mentality. It's easy and feels good to be a victim sometimes. As far as I was done wrong, look what happened to me, poor, pitiful me. So we'll nurse that kind of victim mentality in our lives instead of saying, no, that's not how God wants me to be. The Lord wants me to forgive and let these things go. So we'll slander people who have hurt us. We'll try to get them back. We won't just try to get them back. We'll try to get ahead. Like if I'm in a situation where people are kind of pranking each other and messing with each other, I'm not the guy that gets even. I'm the guy that wants to get ahead. I'm the guy that will take it up a notch. I'm the guy that will saran wrap your car with about 40 different kinds of saran wrap to the point that you will need a machete to get into your car because that sounds fun to me. But when we do this on a personal level, when we feel like we've been hurt, we've been done wrong, so we want to take that out on other people, Folks, now we're finding ourselves falling into sin. There's unforgiveness, there's bitterness. And you know what? Maybe you were done wrong. Maybe legitimately something was done to you. But the Bible still is telling us and calling us that we're not supposed to seek out to try to get even, to try to have vengeance, to try to do those things. Look, you have to let them off your hook. Okay? I was talking to somebody the other day, and that's exactly what I told them. You have to let them off your hook. It doesn't mean they're off God's hook. If the Lord needs to discipline, if the Lord needs to take care of those things, if the Lord needs to put judgment on them, then you let God do it in His time and in His way. It's not my job. I'm not the judge, the jury, or the executioner of everybody that has ever said or done anything to me that I may find hurtful. So me trying to one-up and slander that other person and make it worse, to say unkind things. Sometimes, you know what we'll do? When we don't like something, or we don't like somebody, or hurt with somebody, we'll say something unkind. We'll say something mean, and then we'll kind of laugh it off like it was a joke. It wasn't a joke. We meant it, right? It's kind of like, I've talked about this before, growing up in Alabama. If you say bless your heart to somebody, then you can say anything in the world you want after it about them. That's kind of the rule in the state of Alabama. But that doesn't mean that it's right. Just because something is culturally acceptable, or that's what the world might do, doesn't mean that's how we're called to do. Because what can happen is we can be consumed by this bitterness, by this unforgiveness. And the church at Corinth was kind of dealing with that. They had this individual that had caused all these problems, caused all these conflict, and now it's time to forgive and let him back in. It's time to forgive and put those things in the past and let go of bitterness, and let go of unforgiveness. And it's tough on them. And Paul specifically has to tell them that. The man had sinned against Paul himself. The man had been very critical of Paul himself. But you know what? Paul did not seek vengeance. He didn't call him names. He didn't say, I'm glad you got rid of that jerk. Instead, he says, forgive him. And as you forgive him, so that Satan will not get a foothold in the church. Satan will get a foothold in your life. Because see, this is one of the big things with forgiveness, and I think we miss. Forgiveness isn't about the other person. Forgiveness most of the time is about me, or the person that is forgiving. Because when I hang on to those things, what I'm doing is I'm locking away that bitterness myself. I'm giving Satan that foothold. I'm letting his schemes invade my life. Because the other person, they may not even want to be forgiven. They may not think they did anything wrong. They may not care if they did anything wrong. They may not care if they hurt you. But when I hang on to those things, what I'm doing is damaging my relationship with God. And a lot of times I'm even damaging my relationship with other people. So forgiveness sometimes doesn't really say anything about the person I'm forgiving, but it says something about me. It's about myself, my relationship with God, what I need to do so that I don't drag this stuff around with me like a bad piece of luggage. I'm carrying a backpack full of rocks, weighed down with this bitterness and these things. So you forgive because of what it does for you and what it does for your relationship with God. See, that's one of the things with Christianity. Christianity tends to go further and deeper when it comes to forgiveness, because everything in it is based on something really important. What Christ has done for us, what Christ has forgiven us of. See, that's what's counted on here. That's the measuring stick. It's not how quick the world is to forgive someone, not what the world has forgiven me of, what others has forgiven me of, what Christ has forgiven me of. Because see, I'm not called to live to the world's standards. I'm not called to live to my standards. I'm called to live to God's standards. And when I look at what Christ did and the forgiveness that He extended to those around Him, the forgiveness that He extends to me, because I don't know about you, but Christ has to forgive me of a lot of things on a regular basis. I'm sinful. I struggle. My thoughts, my words, my actions, my deeds, things that I'll put in front of Him in my life. He's constantly having to forgive me. And that calls me to then extend that same thing to other people if I'm going to be Christ-like. If I'm going to be becoming sanctified, which means becoming more and more like Christ. If Christ is going to be working that out in me, I've got to forgive. And look, I'm going to be honest, that can cause you to have to forgive some difficult things. A spouse, maybe even an ex-spouse that really hurt you. A family member that did you wrong. A coworker that just treated you awful. A child that let you down on an incredibly deep level. Forgiveness. You know, that friend that you loved and cared about that dropped the ball in however it was that they hurt you. I'm called to forgive them because Christ has forgiven me of even more. So as you dig in this week and you think about forgiveness, always let that be the thing that focuses back to your mind. What did Christ forgive me of? And how does that call me to forgive and let go of the bitterness for those around me? Hope you guys have a great week.